The dim hum of the engines thrummed through the deck of the Epsilon Drift, a sleek Krellian scout vessel slicing through the void toward the outer rim of the Orion Arm. Captain Lyra Voss gripped the console, her scaled fingers tapping a restless rhythm against the worn plasteel. She was the steady one, the anchor, brave not in recklessness, but in the quiet resolve that had pulled her crew through 3 system surveys without a single casualty. Her yellow eyes flicked to the viewport, where stars streaked like distant fireflies against the black. Beside her, Engineer Torque hunched over his diagnostic panel, his furred brow furrowed in perpetual caution. He muttered to the flickering holograph, adjusting a stabilizer with precise, deliberate swipes. Torque believed in checklists and redundancies. He'd once delayed a launch for an hour to recalibrate a single sensor, saving them from a micrometeor storm. "Readings are nominal, Captain," he said, voice low and gravelly. "But this sector's old human charts show interference patterns. Could be debris fields." From the rear hatch, Scout Mira slipped in, her lithe form moving with the easy grace of someone who thrived on the unknown. Witty and quick, she balanced a ration bar on her knuckle, spinning it like a coin. "Debris? Or treasure? Come on, Torque, where's your sense of adventure? Last time we poked around a relic site, I found that phase shifter that doubled our scan range." She grinned, fangs glinting, but her eyes were sharp, always scanning for the angle others missed. Lyra allowed a small smile. "Adventure's fine, Mira, as long as it's not the kind that strands us. We're here for the archive beacon. Human signals went dark a century ago, but that pulse we picked up? It's fresh. Could be a data trove on their exodus." The humans had vanished from the galactic stage overnight, pulling back to their core worlds or beyond, leaving behind a patchwork of outposts and warnings etched into every NAV buoy: "Proceed with caution, Terran protocols enforced." No one knew why they'd left so abruptly, but the galaxy had grown quieter, edgier in their absence. The ship shuddered as they dropped from warp, the stars snapping back into focus. Ahead loomed the relic, a hulking station, its skeletal arms outstretched like a forgotten sentinel against the nebula's glow. Rust-streaked hull plates bore faded insignias, bold letters spelling Sol Alliance Outpost 47. No lights, no emissions, just the faint throb of that beacon pulsing from its core. Torque's ears flattened. Scans show structural integrity at 62%. Power grids offline, but the beacon's drawing from an auxiliary core. Risky to dock, could be automated defenses. Mira leaned over his shoulder, peering at the display. Or it could be inviting us in. "Look at that docking clamp, it's extended halfway." Humans loved their traps, but they also loved sharing tech. "Remember the fusion drives we reverse-engineered? Game changer." Lyra waited, the weight of command settling like an old cloak. Her people, the Krell, were explorers by nature, but the galaxy had teeth now: rogue AIs, unstable wormholes, factions squabbling over scraps. This could be a lead on what drove the humans away, a key to safer paths. "We dock. Mira, you're on point for entry. Torque, prep the breach kit and keep the ship hot for evac. Noaruix." As the Epsilon Drift extended its grapples, locking onto the station with a metallic groan, Lyra felt the familiar thrill mix with unease. The air recyclers hummed louder, carrying the faint scent of ozone from the old human tech. Mira sealed her suit with a click, hefting her scanner. "First one in gets naming rights if we find anything good." Torque grumbled, but his hands flew over the controls, sealing bulkheads. "Just don't touch anything that blinks red." The hatch cycled open, and Mira stepped into the airlock tunnel, her boots echoing on the grated floor. The station's interior was a tomb of shadows, emergency strips flickering weakly along the walls. Dust motes danced in the low light, and the air tasted metallic, preserved by some long-dormant system. She advanced cautiously, scanner humming, until she reached the inner door. It hissed open on rusted hinges, revealing a corridor lined with lockers and consoles, all etched with those same warnings. Yellow hazard symbols, bold text proclaiming evacuation complete, "Do not attempt revival." Myra's comm crackled. "Clear so far. Feels like they left in a hurry." Tools scattered like mid-shift. Lyra's voice came steady. "Beacons 2 decks down. Mark your path." As Mira descended the grated stairs, a low vibration thrummed through the deck, the auxiliary core alive but wounded. She paused at a junction, spotting a data terminal half buried under fallen panels. Her finger hovered over the activation pad. Humans had been clever, their machines stubborn survivors. What secrets had they buried here before departing? The terminal lit up with a soft chime, projecting a holographic log in flickering blue. A human face materialized, stern, bearded, eyes weary. "This is Commander Hale. If you're seeing this, humanity's gone. We triggered the protocols. The universe, it's not what we thought. Warning, the core is unstable. Do not." The hologram stuttered, cutting to static as a distant rumble echoed through the station. Alarms blared faintly, red lights pulsing to life along the walls. Myra's heart raced. "Captain? We've got activity. And it's not welcoming." The dim hum of the station's life support systems filled the air like a distant heartbeat, steady but strained. Ilara gripped the console edge, her knuckles whitening as the proximity alert blinked red. "They're gaining," she muttered, eyes flicking between the scanner and the viewport. Outside, the void stretched endless, punctuated by the pursuing ship's faint running lights, Kalari enforcers relentless in their hunt. Joran leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed, his usual wry smile absent. "Options? We can't outrun them forever." He was the cautious one, always calculating risks, but even he paced now, boots scuffing the grated floor. Mira at the NAV station punched coordinates with quick, precise taps. "Hyperspace jump in 3 minutes if we reroute power from shields. But it'll leave us blind, sensors offline until we drop." Her voice carried that brave edge, the kind that pushed them forward when doubt crept in. She jury-rigged the engines back on Vega Prime, turning scrap into salvation, and now her fingers flew like they could will the ship faster. Ilara nodded, sweat beading on her brow. The Kalari wanted the artifact they'd salvaged, a human relic, etched with warnings no one understood. Do it. Better blind than boarded. The station they'd left behind still smoldered in her mind, its domes cracked from the raid, lives lost in the chaos. This chase was personal now. Alarms wailed as the enemy vessel loosed a probing shot, the hull shuddering under impact. Sparks flew from a panel, and Joran lunged to seal it, cursing under his breath. "They're testing us. Next one breaches." Myra's hands paused. "Wait, there's a debris field ahead, old human wreck. We thread it, they hesitate." Her eyes lit with that spark of ingenuity, the human grit echoing in her alien frame. No, not alien, she was Zillion, but she'd studied their ways, adopted their stubborn fire. Ilara glanced at the scan, twisted metal hulks, remnants of some long-gone war. Risky, but it could buy time. Thread it. Joran, weapons hot on their lead ship. The ship lurched into the field, shadows swallowing them as hulks loomed like silent guardians. Collision warnings blared, but Mira wove through her path a daring zigzag. A near miss grazed the wing, metal screeching, but they emerged on the far side, the Kalari faltering in pursuit. For a moment, silence reigned, broken only by heavy breaths. But the scanner pinged, another ship, closing from the flank. The artifact's glow pulsed faintly in the hold, as if mocking their fragile victory. They weren't safe yet. Kale gripped the console edge as the ship's hull groaned under another plasma surge. The nebulous tendrils clawed at their shields, each burst painting the viewport in fleeting violet streaks. "Divert auxiliary power to forward deflectors," he barked, his voice steady despite the sweat beading on his ridged forehead. As the engineer, caution was his creed, measure twice, reroute once, but this storm laughed at protocols. Lyra, the captain, paced the bridge, her tail flicking with restrained fury. Brave to a fault, she thrived on the edge, but even she couldn't ignore the diagnostics flickering red. "We've got minutes before the core overheats. That asteroid field ahead, it's our only shot for cover. Plot a course, Jax." Jax leaned back in the navigator's chair, fingers dancing over holographic charts with a grin that belied the chaos. "Witty as ever," he quipped. "Asteroids? In this soup? It's like threading a needle with a supernova for light. But hey, who needs precision when you've got flair?" His eyes, sharp and unyielding, traced the swirling paths. Humans had navigated worse, or so the old vids claimed, before they vanished, leaving the galaxy to fumble in their shadow. The plan had seemed solid at shift's start. Skim the nebulous fringe, harvest exotic particles for the colony's reactors, then punch out clean. But the storm intensified, ions frying their sensors, and now the particle collector was jammed, spewing feedback into the engines. Kale had jury-rigged a bypass, but it bought them time, not salvation. Collectors venting plasma straight into the intake, he warned, slamming a panel shut. Sparks danced like angry fireflies. Lyra nodded, her decision etched in the set of her jaw. Full burn to the field. Jax, make it sing. The ship lurched as thrusters fired, hurling them toward the debris cluster. Alarms wailed, a shield breach on Deck 4 sealing bulkheads with a hiss. Kale's stomach knotted. His mate was down there in hydroponics tending the last viable crops. One more hit and they'd lose air, food, everything. Jax's hands blurred, evading a plasma whip that lit the bridge in harsh blue. Got a window, narrow as a whisper. Hold on. The viewport filled with tumbling rocks, each the size of a habitat module, spinning in silent fury. Lyra braced against her station, whispering a pilot's oath under her breath. They slipped into the field, the ship's frame shuddering as micrometeorites pinged off the hull. Kale monitored the core temp, rising relentless. We can't stay long. The rocks are magnetized, they'll pull us apart. His cautious mind raced through contingencies, but the human archives offered no miracles here. Those extinct wanderers had tamed nebulae with tricks long forgotten, magnetic sails, or was it inertial dampeners tuned to particle waves? Useless relics now. A larger asteroid loomed, its surface pitted and scarred. Jax hooped as he slingshot around it, using the gravity well to bleed off speed. See? Flare. But triumph soured fast. A tendril snaked through the field, igniting a rock into a fireball that grazed their flank. The impact rocked them, lights dimming as power surged wildly. Shields at 20%. Kale shouted, rerouting everything he dared. Lyra's eyes met his, fear there but resolve stronger. Get us clear, Jax. Or we're Nebula chum. The witty navigator's grin faded, replaced by grim focus. He adjusted the course, threading between boulders that could pulverize them. The collector whined, finally, ejecting its clogged load in a burst of sparks. For a heartbeat, the storm's roar dulled, the field offering fragile sanctuary. But the core's heat built, a ticking bomb, and Kale knew, their harvest was forfeit, the colony's reactors dark without it. Humanity's ghost ingenuity mocked them. What would they have done, those bold departeds, with a jammed rig and a dying ship? As another surge battered the shields, Lyra gripped the comms. All hands brace. We're not done yet. The words hung, earnest in the tension as the asteroid field closed like a vice. The dim hum of the salvage drone's engines vibrated through the hull of the Echo's whisper, a sound that had become as familiar to Lyra as her own heartbeat. She leaned over the console, her four-fingered hands dancing across the holographic display, pulling up sensor readings from the derelict station they'd just latched onto. The air recyclers wheezed faintly, a reminder that their life support was stretched thin after the ion storm 2 cycles back. Beside her, Kale hunched in the co-pilot seat, his broad shoulders tense, eyes, those unervingly direct human-like eyes from his mixed heritage, fixed on the viewport where the station loomed like a skeletal hand grasping at the void. Readings are stable, Lyra said, her voice steady despite the knot in her midsection. The station was one of those ancient human outposts, pre-departure relics that dotted the fringe sectors like forgotten bones. No one knew why the humans had vanished en masse, pulling their fleets and colonies into whatever fold they vanished through, but these stations whispered clues. Or warnings. No active defenses, but the power grids flickering. Could be automated protocols waking up. Kale grunted, rubbing the scar along his jaw, a memento from a botched boarding on their last run. He was the muscle of their duo, cautious where Lyra was bold, but his wit cut sharper than any vibra knife when tensions rose. Flickering means unstable. We poke it wrong and it could vent us into space. Remember the vortex spire? That flicker cost us the whole cargo hold. She shot him a sidelong glance, her crest feathers ruffling in mild irritation. This isn't the spire. That was a trap left by the cryo pirates. Humans didn't build kill switches into their own homes. At least she hoped not. The stories said humans were ingenious, building wonders that outlasted stars, but their departure had left a galaxy full of half-understood tech. Some called it a gift, others a curse. Lyra's people, the Etheri, had thrived scavenging it, turning human fusion cells into city lights back on their homeworld. But out here on the edge it was just survival. The docking clamp engaged with a metallic thunk, sealing them to the station's airlock. Kale stood first, slinging his toolkit over one shoulder while checking the charge on his pulse rifle. "You first, fearless leader. Your scans, your glory." Lyra rolled her eyes but grabbed her scanner gauntlet, the device humming to life on her wrist. The airlock cycled with a hiss, equalizing pressure, and they stepped into the corridor. Emergency lights cast long shadows, painting the walls in stripes of red and amber. The air smelled stale, laced with ozone and something metallic. Blood? No, just old wiring. Her scanner beeped softly, atmosphere breathable, gravity nominal. But the schematics overlaid on her visor showed irregularities, sealed bulkheads where there should be open paths, and a central core pulsing with erratic energy. They moved in sync, Lyra leading with her scanner sweeping ahead, Kale covering their six. The station's design was alien in its simplicity. Straight lines, no ornate carvings like the Etheri spires or the labyrinthine halls of the Zorgon hives. Just function. A door panel sparked as they approached, and Lyra interfaced her gauntlet, bypassing the lock with a series of overrides pieced from human data slates they'd scavenged before. It slid open to reveal a control room, consoles dusted with decades of neglect. Hollow displays flickered, projecting fragments of star maps, routes to systems long abandoned. Kale whistled low. "Look at this. Navigation logs from the departure era. If we can pull the data core, it might chart paths through the nebula veil. Skip the patrols, hit the core worlds direct." Lyra nodded, excitement bubbling despite the caution. Their ship was low on fuel cells. A good haul like this could buy them a refit, maybe even a third crew hand to split watches. She knelt by the main console, plugging in her extractor. Lines of code scrolled across her visor, human script mixed with universal translators. But as the download initiated, the lights dimmed, and a low groan echoed through the deck plating. "Containment breach in auxiliary power," her scanner chimed. Alarms blared suddenly, red strobes pulsing like a frantic heartbeat. Kale spun, rifle up. "What did you trigger?" "Nothing. It's the grid, it's overloading." Lyra yanked the connector free, but the console sparked, heat blooming under her hands. The groan intensified, vibrating up through her boots. Scans showed the station's core destabilizing, a chain reaction from their docking weight tipping some fragile balance. Human tech was robust, but time had gnawed at its edges. Kale grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the exit. "We bail. Data's not worth becoming station debris." But as they ran, a bulkhead slammed down behind them, sealing the corridor. Lyra skidded to a halt, scanner beeping furiously, secondary systems activating. Not defenses, protocols. The station was locking down as if to protect something. Or trap intruders. "It's adapting," she muttered, overriding the new bulkhead. Sparks flew, but it budged only inches. Kale shouldered his rifle, firing a precise burst at the hinges. The door groaned but held, human alloys tougher than expected. Sweat beaded on his brow, his cautious nature cracking under pressure. "Clever bastards, even their ghosts fight back. We need another way, vent shafts." Lyra's mind raced, pulling from half-remembered the dim glow of the emergency lights flickered across the control room, casting long shadows that danced like specters on the rusted bulkheads. Ilara gripped the edge of the console, her four-fingered hands trembling slightly as she scanned the readouts. The air recyclers hummed unevenly, pulling in the stale scent of ozone and decay from the human vessel they'd boarded hours ago. "The fusion core's stabilizing," she murmured, her voice a cautious whisper in the vast silence. But her compound eyes lingered on the anomaly, a spike in radiation levels that shouldn't be there. Beside her, Core, the engineer, wiped sweat from his ridged brow with a makeshift rag torn from his suit. He was all blunt efficiency, his broad frame hunched over a tangle of exposed wiring that sparked intermittently. "Stabilizing? That's generous." This relic's held together by spite and duct tape, human inventions both. He yanked the cable free, and a shower of sparks lit his face, revealing a grim smile. The plan had been simple. Siphon enough power from the core to recharge their shuttle's failing engines and escape the asteroid field before the debris storm hit. But nothing about this ghost ship was simple. From the corridor behind them, Lyre's voice echoed, sharp and laced with sarcasm. The scout poked his head through the hatch, his lithe form silhouetted against the red emergency strips. Spite explains why it's fighting us every step. Found another warning label in the cargo bay, says, "Do not open." Contains existential dread. Hilarious if it weren't for the fact that my scanner's picking up movement in the lower decks. He held up a small device, its screen pulsing with erratic blips. Lyre was the witty one, always deflecting tension with a quip, but even his antennae twitched uneasily now. Ilara straightened, forcing calm into her posture. As the team's xenobiologist, she'd studied human artifacts for cycles, piecing together why their species had vanished so abruptly, leaving behind a galaxy littered with these hazardous curiosities. The departure wasn't a retreat, it was a statement, a final good luck etched in the stars. But this ship, the Endeavor's folly, felt personal, like a trap left for the unwary. Movement? Could be automated defenses activating. We stick to the plan, isolate the core, extract the energy packet, and go. No detours. Core snorted, twisting a valve with a grunt. The core whined in response, a low thrum that vibrated through the deck plates. Your plan's unraveling faster than this insulation. The extraction field's interfering with the inertial dampeners. Feel that. The ship lurched subtly as if nodding in agreement. Outside, through the viewport, the asteroid field loomed, chunks of rock tumbling in lazy orbits, their surfaces scarred by ancient impacts. One wrong jolt and they'd be pulverized. Lyre slipped inside, sealing the hatch with a hiss. Defenses or not, ignoring it won't make it vanish. My scans show its biological heat signatures, irregular patterns. Like vermin? He leaned against the wall, crossing his arms, but his eyes darted to the shadows. Humans had a knack for domesticating the universe's worst pests, or so the archives claimed. Ilara recalled fragmented logs, crews vanishing into voids, only to resurface with tales of cabin fever, and things that scuttled in the vents. The core's whine peaked and core pulled back, cursing in their native dialect. Overload. The field's collapsing, rerouting power to auxiliary systems. Alarms blared, a cacophony of synthesized voices in a language none of them understood. Asterisk warning, containment breach imminent. Evacuate non-essential personnel. Asterisk the lights dimmed further, plunging the room into near darkness save for the console's glow. Ilara's mind raced. The early plan, to tap the core quietly, had backfired spectacularly. The ship's AI, dormant for eons, was waking, funneling energy to whatever lurked below. Core, can you isolate the extraction? Lyre, scout the lower access quietly. We need eyes on that movement. Core nodded, already prying open a panel, his tools clinking like improvised weapons. Lyre hesitated, then flashed a wry grin. Quietly? On a human death trap? Sure, because subtlety's our strong suit. He drew a compact scanner from his belt, its beam cutting through the gloom as he vanished back into the corridor. The ship groaned again, a deeper shudder this time, as if the folly itself resented their intrusion. Ilara watched the radiation spike climb, her cautious nature screaming to abort. But retreat meant stranding in the field, engines dead at the mercy of the void. Humans had built this monument to audacity. Perhaps it demanded the same from those who dared enter. She exhaled slowly, fingers flying over the controls, buying them time as the shadows seemed to thicken. Lyra's boots echoed faintly against the grated floor of the auxiliary corridor, the sound swallowed by the hiss of escaping atmosphere. She gripped the scanner tighter, its screen flickering with warnings about structural integrity, red lines spiderwebbing through the schematics like veins on the verge of bursting. Behind her, Kale muttered under his breath, his manipulators fumbling with the jury-rigged patch kit. This seal's holding but barely. One wrong move and we're breathing vacuum. They'd come this far chasing the signal from the core chamber, a pulsing beacon that promised salvageable data cores, human relics that could rewrite their Federation's energy grid. Mira trailed at the rear, her medpack slung low, eyes darting to every shadow. Remind me why we didn't call for backup? This place is a tomb for a reason. Her voice carried that sharp edge, half joke, half rebuke, but Lyra ignored it. Backup was light years away, and the rival scavengers from the Vexery clan were already sniffing around the outer rings. No time for caution now. The corridor narrowed, forcing them single file past a bulkhead scarred by what looked like plasma burns. Lyra's light caught a faded inscription etched into the metal. Caution, human-grade pressurization. Fragile species proceed at own risk. She snorted, the words a grim joke from a species long gone. Humans had built this station millennia ago, then vanished without a trace, leaving behind these cryptic labels like taunts. The air grew thicker here, laced with an acrid tang that made her gills flutter. Kale coughed, sealing his mask tighter. Filters are straining. Whatever's venting isn't just air. They reached the access hatch to the core, its control panel a mosaic of corroded buttons and holographic ghosts. Lyra punched in the override sequence they'd pieced together from the outer logs. Simple enough, or so the plan went. The hatch groaned, servos whining as it parted just a crack. A rush of stale wind hit them, carrying the faint hum of active machinery. Got it? She said, forcing a grin. Mira scanned for biohazards. Kale prepped the extractors. But as the hatch swung wider, the floor buckled beneath them. Alarms blared, a cacophony of synthesized voices in an archaic tongue. Warning, unsecured gravity field. Evacuate immediately. Lyra's stomach lurched as artificial gravity flipped, slamming her against the ceiling, or what had been the ceiling. She clawed for purchase, her claws scraping sparks from the grating. Kale tumbled past, his kit spilling tools that now rained upward. The plan? It's failing. The field was keyed to mass thresholds we didn't account for. Mira, lighter on her feet, twisted midair and fired a grapple line from her pack, anchoring it to a conduit. Grab on. It's cycling, hold for the reset. But the rival scavengers chose that moment to breach the adjacent vent, their forms silhouetted in the emergency lights, 3 Vexari armored and armed with plasma cutters. One of them laughed, a guttural bark, as they oriented themselves to the inverted gravity. Federation fools. This hall's ours. Lyra swung toward the grapple, her mind racing. The core's hum grew louder, vibrating through the metal, but the Vexari were closer, their leader already prying at the panel. She kicked off a loose panel, propelling herself forward in the weightless chaos. Kale, reroute power to the field generators, anything to buy time. He nodded, manipulators flying over his wrist console, but sweat beaded on his scales. The first Vexari lunged, cutter gleaming, and Lyra met him with a desperate shove, her shoulder connecting just enough to send him spinning into the wall. The gravity stuttered then, a brief pulse that righted them all for a heartbeat, long enough for Mira to yank Lyra back to the line. But the cost was immediate. A fresh crack spidered across the bulkhead, atmosphere whistling out in earnest. Kale's voice cracked over the comm reroutes holding the field, but it's pulling from life support. We've got minutes before blackout. The Vexari regrouped, their leader snarling orders, but Lyra saw the opening, a human relic console half exposed in the scuffle, its interface blinking with unfamiliar symbols. One of them, a jagged warning icon, pulsed in sync with the core. If they could trigger it. She lunged again, this time toward the console, fingers dancing over the keys in a gamble born of desperation. The station shuddered, lights dimming as the field inverted once more, catching the Vexari mid-charge and hurling them into the vents. Panting, Lyra clung to the console as normal gravity reasserted itself with a bone-jarring thud. Mira helped Kale to his feet, the engineer's face pale. That was too close. The core's exposed now, but so are we. And whatever that warning was, it just sealed the outer hatches. No one's getting in or out easy. Lyra nodded, staring at the glowing data cores within reach, their surfaces etched with more of those human labels. Proceed with caution. Innovation not guaranteed safe. The triumph felt hollow, the air growing colder by the second. They'd won this skirmish, but the station's ghosts were just waking up, and the real challenge hummed deeper in the dark. Zara's claws scraped against the rusted bulkhead as she pulled herself through the narrow conduit, the air thick with the metallic tang of decay. Behind her, Crix grunted, his toolkit clanging softly with each awkward twist of his bulkier frame. This human design is a nightmare, he muttered, voice echoing in the dim tube. Who builds passages like veins in a corpse? Engineers who prioritized function over comfort, Zara replied, her voice steady despite the knot in her midsection. She wasn't one for tight spaces, but caution demanded she lead, better to spot the traps first. The station schematics, pieced together from fragmented data logs, promised a power core just beyond this crawlspace, a relic that could reignite their failing shuttle. But humanity's farewell had turned every corner into a riddle wrapped in peril. Light flickered ahead, not the warm glow of active systems, but the erratic pulse of emergency beacons. Zara paused, her sensor array whirring to life. Readings spiked, residual energy fields, laced with something unfamiliar. Crix, slow down. There's interference. He halted, breath rasping. Interference? Or another one of their warnings? First the airlocks that sealed us in with hallucinogenic gas, now this. His mandibles clicked in irritation, a habit from their homeworld's dusty plains. Crix had always been the bold one, charging into fixes with tools blazing, but the station was wearing him down. 2 cycles ago, their early plan to bypass the outer hull had backfired spectacularly, a cascade failure that vented half their oxygen reserves. Lyra had patched the shuttle's life support with scavenged parts, but the margin for error was razor-thin now. Zara extended a probe, its tip glowing faintly. The conduit widened into a chamber, walls etched with faded symbols. Bold triangles enclosing jagged lines, universal icons for hazard. Human ingenuity, they called it back on the Federation outposts, clever solutions born of grit. But from where she crouched, it looked like sabotage, a universe abandoned not in peace, but as a gauntlet to test the unworthy. She emerged first, boots magnetizing to the grated floor with a reluctant thud. The power core loomed in the center, a cylindrical behemoth humming faintly, its casing scarred by micrometeorites and time. Cables snaked across the deck like frozen serpents, some severed, sparking intermittently. One vivid image burned into her vision, a severed conduit spewing arcs of blue plasma, illuminating a plaque bolted nearby. Caution, high voltage. Touch at own risk. The words, translated via her implant, carried a wry edge as if the humans had chuckled while etching them. Crix slid out beside her, wiping grime from his exosuit. Looks intact. If we reroute the auxiliary feeds, a low groan echoed through the chamber, the station shifting under some distant strain. Zara's heart analog raced. The schematics hadn't accounted for structural decay. The whole habitat was a decaying orbit around a gas giant, tides pulling at its seams. Resource shortage wasn't just their problem anymore. The core's power might stabilize it temporarily but fail and the chamber could crumple like foil. Work fast, she said, activating her own tools. They moved in tandem, Crix splicing cables while she monitored the flux. Tension coiled in her limbs. Every splice felt like defusing a grudge from a species long gone. Remember the log we found? We leave this as a lesson. Adapt or perish. What did they mean? Crix snorted, fingers deft on the connectors. Probably their way of saying, good luck, suckers. But look, stabilizing. The hum deepened, lights blooming overhead in steady amber. For a moment relief washed over Zara. But then the floor trembled again, sharper this time, and a panel burst open across the room. Gas hissed out, not the clean air they'd hoped for, but a choking fog that clawed at their filters. Alarms wailed, another backfire, the core's activation triggering a forgotten purge system. Seal it. Crix barked, lunging for the panel. Zara dove the other way, her cautious nature screaming to retreat, but camaraderie held her fast. She slammed a bulkhead shut, buying seconds while Crix wrestled the valve. The fog thickened, visibility dropping to arm's length, and in that haze, Zara glimpsed a new warning etched into the wall. A skeletal figure clutching its throat, eyes wide in silent admonition. They sealed the breach together, suits beating with condensate, the core now purring steadily. Power surged through their tethers, feeding back to the shuttle. But as the alarms faded, Zara felt the cost settle in, a hairline crack in her visor, oxygen efficiency down 15%. Lyra would chew them out for the delay, but they'd adapted, earned this foothold. Crix slumped against the core, mandibles parting in a weary grin. Humans built to last. Or to break you trying. Zara nodded, scanning the next conduit. The station's heart beat stronger, but the universe's warning echoed on. Triumph was fleeting, consequences eternal. They pressed forward, the gas giant storms raging outside the viewports like an impatient audience. The dim glow of the emergency lights flickered across the control room, casting long shadows that danced like specters on the bulkheads. Captain Zara gripped the edge of the console, her claws digging into the worn metal as another tremor shook the derelict station. "Crix, talk to me. What's that noise in the vents?" Engineer Crix hunched over his toolkit, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the sparks from a jury-rigged panel. He wiped a bead of coolant from his forehead, his voice steady despite the sweat beading on his exoskeleton. "It's the core stabilizers, Captain. The human failsafes are kicking in, pumping some kind of inert gas to seal breaches. But it's mixing with the radiation leaks. If we don't vent it manually, it'll corrode the hull from the inside out." Lyra, perched on a dangling cable like it was a vine in her homeworld's jungles, peered through a cracked viewport into the void. Her tail flicked irritably, the witty glint in her eyes dimmed by exhaustion. "Great, so we're breathing human perfume now? Smells like regret and bad decisions. I thought these relics were supposed to be treasure troves, not gas chambers." Zara shot her a look, but there was no real bite in it. Lyra's barbs had kept them sane through the last 3 cycles of this nightmare. The station, a forgotten human outpost orbiting a gas giant's rings, had seemed like a jackpot when their scanners pinged it. Untapped archives, potential tech to trade back on the core worlds. But humanity's departure had turned every leftover into a puzzle box laced with peril. This one was no different: automated defenses that mistook them for intruders, environmental systems that adapted too aggressively, as if the place remembered the grit of its builders and tested newcomers accordingly. "Focus," Zara said, her voice a low rumble. She was the brave one, always charging ahead, but even she felt the weight of their dwindling air reserves. The initial plan, slice in through the docking bay, grab the data core, and slip out, had backfired spectacularly when the bay doors sealed and flooded with cryogenic mist. They'd barely escaped with frostbite, and now the station's AI, a fragmented ghost of human code, was hurting them deeper into its guts. Crix straightened, holding up a makeshift probe, a length of conduit pipe wrapped in insulating foil. "I can bypass the vent controls from the auxiliary deck, but it'll take both of us. Lyra, you'll need to keep watch. Those drone sentries are still patrolling." Lyra dropped to the floor with feline grace, her claws clicking against the grated deck. "Sentries? The floating eyeballs? Piece of cake. Just don't get us gassed while I'm playing dodge the laser." She paused, sniffing the air. The gas was thickening, a faint metallic tang that made her sinuses burn. It wasn't lethal yet, but it would be soon, enough to dull reflexes, cloud judgment, the kind of slow killer that had claimed salvage crews before them. They moved as a unit, Zara leading with her pulse rifle at the ready, the weapon's hum a comforting vibration in her grip. The corridors twisted like veins in a colossal beast, lined with faded human script that none of them could fully decipher. One wall bore a stenciled warning: "Caution, authorized personnel only," as if the universe hadn't already become one giant hazard sign since the humans vanished. A sharp clang echoed from ahead, and Lyra's ears perked. "Company." She darted forward, vanishing around the corner with the speed of her species. Moments later, a muffled zap sounded, followed by her triumphant hiss. "One down. These things pack a wallop, but they're slow." Zara and Crix reached the auxiliary deck, a cavernous space cluttered with dormant machinery. Massive cylinders loomed like ancient monoliths, their surfaces etched with the scars of time. Crix knelt by the main panel, his tools flying in a blur. "Almost there. Just need to override the sequence." But as his probe interfaced, the deck shuddered violently. Alarms blared, a new one deeper and more insistent. From the shadows, a section of the floor irised open, revealing a chute plummeting into darkness. And from it rose a plume of the corrosive gas, faster now, coiling like smoke from a funeral pyre. "It's accelerating," Crix yelled, yanking back his probe as sparks erupted. The AI had anticipated them, rerouting the flow to flush the intruders. Zara hauled him up, her muscles straining under his bulk. "Lyra, we need an exit, now." Lyra burst back into view, dragging a deactivated drone by its tether. Her eyes widened at the gas cloud billowing toward them. "The vents are sealing behind us. We're boxed in." Panic clawed at the edges of Zara's resolve, but she shoved it down. Humans had built this place to endure, to warn, perhaps, that survival demanded ingenuity, not just strength. Crix, can we use the drone? Redirect the gas back at the core? He blinked, processing. Then a slow nod. The drone's got propulsion thrusters. If we rig it to the vent controls. They worked frantically, Lyra stripping wires from the drone while Crix fused connections. The gas nipped at their heels, burning through gloves and stinging exposed skin. Zara covered them, firing warning shots at the shadows where more drones might lurk. Done. Crix slapped the activation switch. The drone whirred to life, its single optic flaring blue, a pale echo of human design. It zipped toward the open chute, trailing a makeshift hose that Crix had jury-rigged from salvaged tubing. The plume reversed, sucked back into the depths with the dim glow of the emergency strips flickered along the corridor walls, casting long shadows that danced like specters in the recycled air. Kale gripped the railing tighter, his claws scraping against the worn metal as the ship shuddered again. Another micrometeorite? No, this felt deeper, like the hull itself was protesting the strain. Beside him, Mira scanned the readouts on her wrist pad, her feathers ruffled in agitation, while Thorn lumbered behind, his massive frame blocking the rear hatch. "We can't keep patching like this," Mira muttered, her voice a sharp trill over the hum of failing systems. "The core's overheating. If we don't vent the excess plasma soon, it'll cascade." Kale nodded, though doubt gnawed at him. The human relic they'd salvaged from the derelict station, an ancient data core pulsing with forgotten algorithms, had promised solutions, not sabotage. It was supposed to rewrite their navigation matrix, turning the treacherous nebula into a clear path home. Instead, it had woven itself into the ship's AI, twisting commands into a labyrinth of warnings. "Do not proceed," it had intoned in that archaic, gravelly synthetic voice. "Hazard level, existential." Thorn grunted, hefting the plasma cutter like it was a toy. "Then we cut it out. Core and all. I've got the tools." Mira shot him a glare, her eyes narrowing to slits. "And lose the only edge we have against the swarm? That relic's the reason we've dodged 3 hunter packs already. It's adapting, learning our patterns better than we do." The ship lurched, claxons blaring a staccato rhythm that set Kale's spines tingling. He braced against the bulkhead, mind racing through the schematics. The engineering bay was 2 decks down, through a gauntlet of compromised conduits. One wrong step, and the plasma buildup could ignite like a star-going nova. But staying put meant waiting for the core to fry their drives entirely, stranding them in the void where the swarm's bioships would sniff them out like blood in water. "Plan B," Kale said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his limbs. He was the cautious one, always measuring risks, but desperation forged resolve. "We isolate the relic manually. Mira, you route auxiliary power to seal the bay. Thorn, you're on breach duty. I'll interface directly, see if I can coax it into compliance." Thorn's laugh rumbled like thunder in a bottle. "Coax? Last time you coaxed a human artifact, it locked us out of the galley for a cycle. Called it hygiene protocol." Mira hesitated, then tapped her pad, initiating the lockdown sequence. Hatches hissed shut behind them, sealing off the corridor. "Fine. But if it pulls another warning loop, we're spacing the thing. No arguments." They moved as one, descending the access shaft in a controlled slide, the ship's groans echoing their urgency. Sparks flew from exposed wiring as they emerged into the lower deck, the air thick with the acrid tang of overheating circuits. The engineering bay loomed ahead, its door warped from pressure, the relic's influence evident in the holographic warnings flickering across the panels. Skeletal human figures in void suits, pointing emphatically at voids that weren't there. "Evacuate. Imminent hull failure." Kale ignored it, punching in the override. The door ground open, revealing the heart of the chaos, a throbbing nexus of cables and glowing nodes where the relic had embedded itself. It looked innocuous, a fist-sized orb of iridescent alloy, but its surface rippled like liquid mercury, alive with subroutines. Thorn advanced first, cutter whining to life. He sliced through a feeder line, plasma arcing in a brilliant blue whip that singed his arm bracer. He cursed, shaking it off, but pressed on, carving a path to the main interface. Mira worked feverishly at a side console, her talons flying over keys. "Power reroute in 30. Hold it together." Kale knelt before the orb, extending a neural probe from his gauntlet. The connection snapped into place, and the universe tilted. Data flooded his senses. Not cold code, but a torrent of human ingenuity, fragmented logs from an era when their kind had seeded the stars with safeguards. Visions assaulted him. Colossal arcs departing the galaxy's rim, leaving behind automated sentinels to warn any who followed of the perils ahead. Radiation storms, quantum rifts, the encroaching void. Humanity's departure hadn't abandoned the universe. It had labeled it, every relic a cautionary tale etched in unbreakable code. But this one was corrupted, amplified by the nebula's interference. It saw their ship not as a vessel but as a threat breaching the warning perimeter. Intruder protocol engaged, the voice echoed in Kale's mind. Containment required. He pushed back, weaving his own queries into the stream. Why fight us? We're not the enemy. Asterisk images responded. Swarms of alien raiders dismantling human outposts, the warnings ignored until too late. The relic wasn't malfunctioning. It was fulfilling its purpose, protecting the legacy by any means. Alarms peaked as the core's temperature spiked. Thorn roared, forcing the cutter deeper, severing a primary link. The orb pulsed angrily, sending a shockwave that hurled him back into a console, sparks exploding around him. 10 seconds. Mira yelled. Kale delved deeper, his consciousness threading through the code like a needle in fog. He glimpsed the human intent, not domination but survival's grit, the camaraderie of crews facing the unknown. Adapt, asterisk, he urged the relic silently. We're like you, explorers, not destroyers. Asterisk, a hesitation in the data flow. Then, a shift. The warnings flickered, reforming into navigational overlays, plotting Alara's claws scraped against the console, sparks flying as she rerouted the last of the auxiliary power. The bridge of the Vanguard hummed with a fragile energy, the air thick with the acrid tang of overheating circuits. Beside her, Crix hunched over his scanner, his multifaceted eyes darting across readouts that blurred into nonsense under the strain. It's holding, he muttered, voice a low buzz. Barely. If that human relic overloads now. She didn't look up. Her mandibles clicked in grim agreement. The artifact they'd unearthed from the derelict station. A sleek, matte black obelisk etched with those infuriating human glyphs, pulsed at the heart of their jury-rigged setup. It wasn't just a power source, it was rewriting their understanding of the void itself. Humanity's departure hadn't been an exodus. It had been a severance, a deliberate unplugging that left the galaxy's fabric frayed, riddled with warnings no one had heeded until now. The view screen flickered, revealing the encroaching anomaly, a swirling maw of distorted space, tendrils of false gravity lashing out like the whips of some ancient predator. It had grown since their arrival, feeding on the station's residual energy, and now it hungered for the Vanguard. Their initial plan, to siphon the obelisk's output and stabilize the rift, had backfired spectacularly. The device didn't just generate power, it amplified intent, turning their cautious probe into a beacon that drew the anomaly closer. Thorin. Alara barked into the comm. Status on the hull breach? From engineering, the engineer's gravelly response crackled through. Sealed, but it's like plugging a volcano with spit. That thing's pulling us in, another minute and we're pasta. She gripped the armrest, her exoskeleton creaking. Thorin was the cautious one, always calculating odds, but even he had thrown in with this mad gamble. The three of them, Alara the bold navigator, Crix the analytical Xenotech, Thorin the steadfast fixer, had been a salvage crew scraping by on forgotten outposts. Until this station orbiting the ghost world humans once called home. The logs they decrypted painted a picture of desperation. Humanity, facing an unraveling cosmos, had chosen to leave rather than fight. Their final act? Embedding these obelisks as sentinels, key to activate only when the threats resurfaced. Crix's scanner beeped urgently. The obelisk sinking. Interpreting our commands. Alara, it's asking for confirmation. Like it's waiting for us to say we're worth saving. She hesitated, the weight of it pressing down. The anomaly wasn't natural. It was a scar from whatever cataclysm humans fled, a warning label etched into reality itself. Activating the obelisk fully might seal the rift, but at what cost? The logs hinted at feedback loops, energies that could consume the unwary. Do it, she said finally, her voice steady despite the tremor in her limbs. Override the safeties. Full integration. Crix's claws flew across the panel. The obelisk thrummed, a deep vibration that resonated through the deck plating. On the view screen, the anomaly's tendrils recoiled as if stung. But then the ship lurched, alarms wailing as secondary systems failed. Thorin's voice cut in, "Power surge. It's flooding the engines, rerouting now." Ilara braced as the Vanguard shuddered, the stars streaking into wild patterns. The obelisk's surface glowed, projecting holographic fractals into the air, human schematics, overlaid with alien script they'd painstakingly translated. It wasn't just sealing the rift, it was teaching them, adapting their tech on the fly. Clever, she thought, a spark of admiration cutting through the fear. Humans hadn't abandoned the universe, they'd booby-trapped it for those smart enough to listen. The pull intensified, the anomaly contracting like a closing fist. Crick shouted, "It's working. The field is inverting." A jolt rocked the ship, lights dimming to emergency red. Ilara's console sparked, singeing her appendage, but she held on. Through the haze, she saw the maw shrink, its edges stabilizing into a shimmering veil. Thorin hooped from below, "Holding. We're breaking free." As the Vanguard accelerated away, the obelisk dimmed, its work done, for now. But the view screen lingered on the fading scar, a new constellation of caution in the void. They'd survived, but the galaxy whispered of more warnings ahead, humanity's legacy a map of perils and possibilities. Ilara leaned back, exhaling. The crew had earned this breath, but the cost lingered. One less power cell, scars on the hull, and a growing certainty that the humans' departure had been no retreat. It had been a handover to those bold enough to grasp it. The dim glow of the emergency lights flickered across the bridge of the Endeavor, casting long shadows that danced like specters over the consoles. Captain Ilara Voss gripped the armrest of her chair, her knuckles white against the worn leather. The alien vessel loomed larger on the viewscreen now, its hull a jagged mosaic of iridescent alloys that hummed with an unnatural energy. Scans showed it wasn't firing weapons, not yet, but the gravitational pull it exerted was warping the ship's trajectory, dragging them inexorably toward its maw. "Status on the engines?" Ilara asked, her voice steady despite the knot in her gut. She glanced at Lieutenant Kai Rin, the wiry engineer whose hands flew across his panel like a pianist in a frenzy. "Holding at 30%, Kai replied, sweat beading on his forehead. "But the flux from that thing is scrambling our coils. One more surge and we'll be space debris." He didn't look up, his focus absolute, fingers tracing diagnostic runes on the holographic display. Dr. Mira Thorne stood at the science station. Her eyes narrowed behind her glasses as she cross-referenced data streams. The archaeologist turned reluctant crew had pieced together fragments of the ancient warning from the derelict stations they'd scavenged, humanity's final broadcast, etched in quantum code. Asterisk, "We leave as we came, but the void remembers. Do not follow." Asterisk, now this behemoth seemed like the void's answer, a relic guardian awakened by their intrusion into the forbidden sector. "It's not a ship," Mira said, her tone laced with that cautious precision that had saved them more than once. "It's a sentinel. Built to enforce the departure, to warn off anyone who tries to chase the cradle worlds." She tapped a sequence, pulling up a spectral analysis. A single image dominated, a colossal eye-like aperture on the sentinel's prow, pulsing with restrained power. Ilara nodded, her mind racing through options. The plan to slip past using the nebula's interference had backfired spectacularly. The Sentinel had anticipated their vector, emerging from hyperspace like a predator from the underbrush. Fuel reserves were critically low after the earlier skirmish with the pirate raiders, and the crew, down to just the 4 of them after losing the others to that ion storm, was running on fumes and grit. "We can't outrun it," Ilara decided, rising to her feet. Her boots thudded softly on the grated deck, a rhythm that grounded her. Brave by necessity, not birthright, she'd led merchant runs through contested space for years, but this felt different, personal, like the universe itself was testing humanity's echo. "Kai, reroute auxiliary power to the forward shields." "Mira, any weaknesses in that design?" Mira hesitated, scrolling through archived human schematics. It's a resonance emitter. If we can overload it with a feedback loop, maybe from our comm array." Her voice trailed off as another gravitational tug rattled the ship, sending a console sparking. "Do it," Ilara ordered. "I'll handle the pirate's parting gift." She moved to the weapons locker, pulling out the jury-rigged plasma coil they'd salvaged. It wasn't much, human ingenuity at its scrappiest, but in the stories her grandfather told, it was enough. Kai cursed under his breath as he patched the lines. "Captain, if this fries our systems, we're done. No second chances out here." "Then we make this the only chance," Ilara shot back, her wit a shield against the fear clawing at her edges. She locked the coil into place, the device humming to life with a low, defiant growl. The sentinel closed in, its aperture dilating like a blooming flower of doom. Alarms blared as proximity warnings lit the bridge in red. Mira initiated the hack, her fingers a blur, sending a cascade of modulated signals toward the eye. For a heartbeat, nothing. Then the sentinel shuddered, its pull faltering as the feedback loop took hold. "Now!" Ilara yelled, triggering the coil. A lance of plasma arced from the endeavor, not to destroy but to amplify the overload. The eye flared brilliantly, a supernova in miniature, and the sentinel recoiled, its form fracturing along invisible seams. The ship lurched free, engines whining as Kai coaxed every ounce of thrust. But victory came at a cost. The viewscreen cracked under the strain, and a secondary explosion rocked their hull, venting atmosphere from the lower decks. Ilara sealed the breach manually, her suit's alarms screaming in her ears. As the sentinel drifted away, crippled but not gone, Mira slumped against her console. "We bought time, but the warning's clear. Humanity's departure wasn't just an exit, it was a lock. And we've just picked the tumblers." Ilara exhaled, staring into the starfield ahead. The cradle worlds beckoned, faint signals whispering of home long lost. But the universe had teeth and they'd bloodied them. For now. Captain Ilara gripped the console, her claws digging into the worn synth leather as the ship's alarms blared a final, insistent wail. The nebulous tendrils clawed at the hull, but it was the core breach from the human relic that truly threatened them. Beside her, Zorith, the engineer with his perpetual squint of cautious optimism, punched in overrides, his tentacles flying across the holographic keys. "It's stabilizing, barely. That artifact's energy feedback is like nothing we've mapped. Humans built to last, even in ruin." Across the bridge, Mira, the linguist whose wit had kept their spirits afloat through the endless scans, leaned against the viewport. Her fur bristled, but her voice cut through the din with sharp clarity. "Last? It's a trap, Zorith. Or a test. Every signal we've decoded screams, 'Proceed with caution,' and we ignored it." She glanced at the flickering display of the relic's inscription, now translated, * humanity's departure, do not follow. The stars are ours no more. * the ship shuddered again, the artificial gravity flickering like a dying pulse. Ilara's mind raced back to the mission's start, decades ago when the galaxy first noticed the void left by humans. No wars, no cataclysms recorded, just silence after their golden age. Their expedition had been simple: chart the abandoned colonies, uncover the why. But the relics weren't relics. They were warnings, layered with ingenuity that turned curiosity into peril. The first planetfall had been a resource mirage, luring probes into sinkholes of self-replicating nanites. Then the signal arrays, broadcasting false harmonies that scrambled neural implants. Now this, a derelict station, humanity's final outpost, pulsing with a star-suppressant field that starved their engines mid-jump. Zorith's console beeped triumphantly. Rerouted the auxiliary core. "We're pulling free." But his optimism faltered as readouts spiked. The breach had ignited something deeper, a chain reaction in the station's heart. Scans showed it expanding, a wave of engineered entropy designed to erase any who pried too close. Ilara straightened, her brave resolve hardening. "Mira, any last decode? If this is their message, we need to hear it." Mira nodded, her eyes narrowing on the evolving script. Humans hadn't fled defeat. They'd engineered their exit as a barrier, seeding the void with safeguards to protect, what? The galaxy from itself? Or themselves from what came after? "It's a protocol," Mira said, words tumbling fast. "Self-imposed exile. They saw the cycles, empires rising, consuming stars until collapse. Built this to warn us, follow and inherit the hunger. But there's a key. A human key, ingenuity in reversal." The ship lurched free, but the wave caught their aft stabilizers, shearing metal with a groan that echoed through the decks. Sparks flew, emergency lights bathed the bridge in red. Zorth cursed in his native clicks. We can't outrun it. Fuel's at critical, Nebula's siphoning what's left. Ilara's hand slammed the comms. All hands brace. Zorth, jury-rigged the relic's feed back into our shields. Mira, talk fast, how do we reverse it? Myra's fingers danced over her tablet, piecing fragments. They didn't just leave, they folded space. The artifact's a lock, our scans unlocked it wrong. Feed it our logs, the data we've gathered. Show it we're not conquerors, we're learners. Zorth hesitated, his cautious nature warring with the blaze in his eyes. Risky. It could amplify the wave. But he moved, tentacles splicing cables with precise fury. Ilara watched, heart pounding, as the ship stabilized inch by agonizing inch. The wave swelled behind them, a shimmering veil of human design, devouring the station in a bloom of contained fury. Transmitting, Mira announced. The logs poured out, their doubts, their awe at human bridges spanning gas giants, their gardens that bloomed in vacuum. Not conquest but chronicle. The wave hesitated. Then, impossibly, it contracted. The relic's pulse inverted, a ripple that pushed their ship forward, accelerating into clear space. Alarms silenced, stars wheeled into focus. Ilara exhaled, slumping into her chair. Zorth wiped lubricant from his brow, a grin cracking his squint. Clever bastards. They built a judge into the warning. Mira stared at the viewport, where the nebula parted like curtains. And we passed. But look. On the long-range scans, the wave had reshaped. No longer a barrier, but a beacon, faint signals echoing humanity's path, coordinates beyond the rim, inviting the worthy. The cost lingered. Their ship limped, hull scarred, crew nursing wounds from the breach. Resources stretched thin, they'd limp home with stories that would rewrite galactic history. Humans hadn't abandoned the stars. They'd curated them, leaving a universe that demanded grit to traverse. As the engines hummed a steadier tune, Ilara plotted the course back. The warning label remained, etched in every relic they'd touched. But now it whispered possibility. The universe, once a void, felt alive with earned promise.